Hello my friends, my name is Artur and I am an Estonian soldier. Recently I had a live stream and you guys told me a lot of ideas what I should make a video about. So today we're gonna take one of those ideas, which is the Battle of 73 Easting. You guys told me it's one of the craziest tank battles ever to go on in US history, and since I recently made a video about Abrams M1 tank, I would like to see how US handles himself in tank action. Biggest tank battle in US history. We're gonna find out everything about it. Recently I have made more videos about the US weapon systems and weapons, but now I figure it's time to go back to the good old history. It is still connected to the military, so don't worry. Already packed and ready to go. These are signed and numbered cups. Only 15 of them. 7 of them are already booked, but we have 8 more. If you want any of these, want to be part of the 15 people special elite squad, head on to the patron, the link is in the description below. Become a legend or god tier patron and I'll send these straight to your address. No one else will get them, only you. Alright, but now let's see. How does the US handle himself in the biggest tank battle in their history? Go and grab your Estonian Youtuber Cup, let's go.
The end of America's war in Vietnam saw a US military in crisis, its morale all but depleted and its combat experience watered down by massive conscription. In the years that followed, the Pentagon focused on restoring America's military by returning to an all-volunteer force and addressing the problems of systemic drug abuse and a weak officer and non-commissioned officer corps.
Systemic drug abuse? Yeah, actually, if you think about things were a lot different back in the Vietnam time. It was a conscript war. It was a draft, so you had to go if you were drafted, and the whole hippies fought against it. And it wasn't a professional military, but a conscripts, almost like Estonia. Only it's US, so they get better equipment and better training. But still, if you think about it, it's so weird to think about US as a conscript system. My brother told me that it still is a conscript system, only that you guys' government doesn't force it anymore because the professional army is that big. They don't need to enforce it. There's no all-out conflicts also. Yeah, comparing to that, you could actually say that the US army now is the strongest that it has ever been in the world. It is the strongest army that has ever existed in the world. I think you could say that.
How well would America's military fare in a new conflict after years of neglect and waste? 20 years after Vietnam, the world would get to find out, as America's forces were immediately thrown into the last of the greatest tank battles of the 20th century. Today we're taking a look at the Battle of 73 Easting and how America proved once more it was a force to be reckoned with. The first Gulf War, or Operation Desert Shield and later Desert Storm, was the last major war of the 20th.
I see my viewer statistics, I know how old you guys are, and let me tell you, some of you have been to Desert Storm and some of you have taken part in those wars back in the 91. The biggest part of my viewers are 18 to 45 and some are older, so if any of you has been there actively serving at that time, feel free to comment, I will pin it. It would be so cool. This is your experience, I'm just watching it as the next generation, but you have been there. Respect, my man.
Century, fought between Iraq and a coalition of over 30 nations. It was ultimately a test, not just of America's post-Vietnam War military, but of the UN as a world peacekeeping organization. With a potential to escalate to an all-out regional conflict between Arab states, failure to contain Iraq's hostility would have signaled to the world that even after decades of work, the UN was just as a lame duck at global peacekeeping as the League of Nations before it. But how did the war start?
Yeah, if you don't know, then the League of Nations kind of failed to prevent a world war. It did. It failed to prevent it. So it was just a League of Nations on paper, but really it didn't have any power, it didn't have any force except for the words it used, but no real force. UN does have force. UN has the soldiers that all of its members commit to it. And these members are very powerful, so UN is a different story. They do have physical force to enforce peace if necessary. I know it sounds weird, yeah, we're gonna enforce peace with weapons, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. You know, good old American freedom, we could use it in Arab states. Let's take this moment to thank the Patreons. Patreons, you are the backbone of this channel, you make it happen. Thanks to you I can do these videos. I can fulfill the products, I can do the emails, I can put all of this time into this channel. It's not just making the videos, it's answering the emails, comments, fulfilling the products. It takes a lot of time. And thanks to you, my friends, I don't have to find external work. So 3 new names who I am very thankful for. We have one, Tyler Rogers. Thank you for becoming a Patreon. We have Dwayne. Thank you, Dwayne. Finally, we have Secret Name. That is your real name. Your name is Secret Name. Very glad. Obviously from the CIA. Thank you for becoming a patron.
Iraq's belligerence towards Kuwait started toward the end of the Iran-Iraq War, a brutal conflict that lasted for 8 years. During the conflict, Kuwait and Saudi Arabia had backed Iraq financially, lending it billions of dollars. After the war, Iraq complained to the Arab League that its debts should be forgiven, as it had acted in the foreign policy interests of both Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, who feared a growth of Iranian Shia influence amongst their own Shia populations. Iraq also raised concerns that both nations were producing more oil than the agreed-upon OPEC production limits, which was lowering the price of oil and costing Iraq billions. Lastly, Iraq specifically leveled charges against Kuwait that it was exploiting Iraqi natural resources by slant drilling across its northern border into Iraq's Rumelia oil field, in essence drilling diagonally to bypass national borders underground. If you've seen There Will Be Blood, it's the milkshake scene. Iraq did not like Kuwait drinking its milkshake one bit, and after the Arab League refused to act, Iraq...
Okay, so Kuwait, Iraq and Saudi Arabia were all allies and part of the OPEC, all oil producing nations. When there's oil, where there's money or wealth, problems soon come. It's a problem basically of how to divide the oil. Kuwait is taking my oil, and Saudi Arabia, you are producing more than necessary, so my prices are low. Comes down to oil. We don't have to worry, the oil wars will end in about 50 years, maybe 100 years, when all of the raw oil will be gone. Then wars will start over water or religions, I think. What do you think? What do you think the wars will be in the future about? Not oil, there's not gonna be any oil, so I think it's food, water, territory, religion, political ideology, not that much. That's the Cold War scene.
Prompted by those and other grievances, launched a ground invasion of Kuwait, annexing the nation as a province of Iraq. For its...
Immediately? Like, oh, we're pressing charges against you, boom, immediately we have now a row of tanks going into your nation. I think it's a bit harsh, but I guess that's how they do things in Arab states.
The United States had long tried to broker a settlement in the region, but when Iraq linked its grievances with enforcing a resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the U.S. refused to negotiate. Yet the United States remained reluctant to commit to military force, and ultimately it was Great Britain's Margaret Thatcher who reminded U.S. President George Bush Sr. about the consequences of inaction during Germany's hostilities prior to World War II. Most famously by telling the US president not to go wobbly. Wobbly President Bush would not go, and he...
I mean, Margaret Thatcher is a damn woman. She's a strong woman. She was called the Iron Lady, if you don't know about her. She was more man in the politics than any man could be. I mean, she was a woman to tell President Bush to go to war. Imagine a woman like that. Bush doesn't need anybody to tell him to go to war. He would go to war for free. And Margaret was the woman to like, hey, Bush, you bailing out on me? She's a legend. We're learning history here, we're learning it together. Alright, the Estonian Youtuber Cup competition. Let's make it fast. But, before we go, I do have an announcement for you, and this will be a good one. Wait for it. There will be a Discord server in a week. That's all I'm gonna say to you, nothing more. And now we'll go on with the competition. I know you're dying of excitement. First of all, we have Cole Money. Cole, you're from Kittening. Kittening, that's the city. A lot of kitty cats there. Kittening. That's how it got its name. Official fact from internet. That's in Pennsylvania. We got James Stradner from Cameron. You know that Chevrolet Camaro? That really sportsy, cool, bulky car? Well, a lot of those in Cameron. Camaro. I just made a connection there. James, you from Missouri. We have Orlando Nunez. Said it as an Estonian, could say it also Orlando Nunez, but I know it's not like that because Orlando, you're from New York, which is in New York. City and the state are the same. We have Rob Pollock. It's not Pollock, it's Pollock. Mr. Pollock, you're from Asheville, North Carolina. Only 3 for North Carolina. Come on, North Carolinians, get to work. We have Greg Wheelock from Ames, Iowa. Iowa is the place where I guess Iowa-classed submarines are made. Just a wild guess here. Talking about submarines, I've never still done video about submarines, so I should do one. And finally we have Ethan Ferguson from Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania? I've heard that name before today. You know what that makes? Pennsylvania the state of the day. Way to go, William. You have made Pennsylvania the state of the day, meaning that we will all learn one fact about Pennsylvania. Let me add the point first. "22 to Pennsylvania, exactly the great number to learn the fact. The fact is, in 1946, Philadelphia in Pennsylvania was home for the first ever computer created. Thank you, Pennsylvania. Yes, I have a computer I needed for editing my videos to be a YouTuber, so thanks a lot. And now we'll give Pennsylvania the state of the green line under its name. Oh yeah. Beautiful. Look at this dude. Look at him. Ethan Bello. Look at this gun. Look at this uniform and the cup. Oh, magnifico. Magnifico, Ethan. Way to go. This is the cup pick of the week. Best one sent so far. Next week we'll have another one, so send in your cup picks to be featured in the channel. But Ethan, you're rocket, man.
Immediately demanded an exit from Kuwait by Iraq. With Iraq poised to invade Saudi Arabia and seize control of over 65% of the world's oil-producing fields, the US and other allied nations had pre-deployed several 100,000 troops to Saudi Arabia as part of Operation Desert Shield.
Iraq threatened to overcome Saudi Arabia? Well, good luck with that. I mean, Saudis are US allies with US weaponry. All of the weaponry you have in the US, I know, the most advanced, the newest and expensive one, they don't have. But still, the best ones in the world, Saudis have, thanks to the US. So, Iraq, good luck with invading them with the Soviet technology they had. Not gonna happen. Yeah, Iraq got most of its technology from Russia and Soviet Union, and Saudis get most of their military tech, as is Israel getting it from the US, which makes them one of the most powerful countries in the Middle East.
On the eve of war, these troops were reinforced with detachments from many NATO and non-NATO nations, including several Arab League nations, which President Bush had insisted on joining so the conflict would not be seen purely as West versus Arab. When Iraq refused to withdraw from Kuwait, the US launched Operation Desert Storm on the 17th of January 1991, and the Battle of 73 Easting, the last great tank battle of the 20th century, soon followed. So who were the combatants, and what weapons was each side bringing to the fight? On the defending side was Iraq's fearsome Republican Guard, with the best training and equipment available to the Iraqi forces. The Republican Guard had been a force to be reckoned with during the Iran-Iraq War, responsible for some of Iraq's greatest victories. It was these elite soldiers who were dispatched to be the first to meet the American advance, and American war planners had estimated that defeating the Republican Guard forces would be a costly victory, even weakened as they were by weeks of aerial bombardment. The Republican Guard
I agree with the US strategy. If you're going to have a ground invasion, at least bomb them for weeks, and then before you go, you have to soften up the enemy. Otherwise, US troops are strong, but still people get killed, men get shot. It's very bad publicity. It's better if you soften up the enemy with aerial bombardment before you go. Makes it much easier to clean up the bits. Okay, I'm talking as I know something. I don't know anything. I'm just a ground infantryman from Estonia.
Brought the vaunted Soviet-built T-72 main battle tank to the battle.
Soviet.
A stalwart of Soviet design philosophy, the T-72 brought few innovations, but was a solidly built and capable tank. With a 125mm cannon, one 7.62mm and one 12.7mm machine gun. The T-72 may have been nearly 2 decades old, but it was...
No. I mean, I know what he's gonna say. He's gonna say it's still a good tank, but no, it's not. It's crap. It's super crap. Built by the Soviets. And living in Estonia, we still have some Soviets thing laying around, Soviet houses. They built things to break. They didn't want them to break, but everything built by the Soviets didn't last. It didn't work. It always worked wrong. It broke down. It started fires. Knowing how they made things, then yeah, this video, maybe they don't have Maybe they don't have contact with Soviet-made things, but they're horrible. Including this tank. Haven't seen it, haven't touched it, but I already know, because I live in Estonia, we have a lot of Soviet legacy here. It is horrible. And it has no chance against American better-built tanks. I don't know which tanks they used in this battle. Couldn't be the M1 Abrams. Or could it? Because if it was, then there's even no contest.
Still a formidable threat. Its cannon had exceptional accuracy and firing rate both, with up to 8 rounds a minute, or 1.2 rounds
good.
if loaded manually,
That's really
and
good.
an armor penetration of 590 to 630 millimeters at 2,000 meters. On the defensive, a T-72's frontal
These numbers are actually really good.
armor was 200 millimeters thick and capable of stopping a direct hit from an M1 Abrams from 2,000 meters away.
No
The
way!
T-72
You could stop Abrams shots from 2 clicks. That's very impressive. I mean, I have my doubts with this. I mean, it seems too much for Soviet-made technology to be that resilient to American tanks. From 2 clicks away, still you're fine if you're shot in the front armor. If you know it to be true, please let me know in the comments. I know I have Desert Storm veterans watching me right now. Forgive me if I'm naive and stupid about something. I don't know stuff about this, but this seems like Abrams wouldn't have a problem with the T-72. Is it true?
T-72's greatest weakness, however, was its lack of thermal vision systems and very poor night vision capabilities, which were a crippling deficiency in combat. Supporting its T-72 tanks were mechanized infantry deployed in Soviet-built BMP-1 infantry fighting vehicles, equipped with a 73mm semi-automatic cannon and a 7.2mm coaxial machine gun. BMPs not only protected squads of soldiers that rode inside of them, but were capable of taking on lightly armored vehicles themselves. Iraq's Republican Guard BMPs were also equipped with 9M14 and 9M113 Conquer's anti-tank wire-guided missiles, making them an agile threat to American tanks.
Okay, wire-guided. We also use wire-guided anti-tank missiles in Estonian infantry because they are the cheapest way to have a guided missile destroying an enemy tank. Wire-guided missiles don't need expensive computer chips and expensive technology inside them, because how they work is you shoot it out. It truly has a very, very thin wire at the back of it, and the missile is always connected to you with the wire. You're just gonna shoot it out, the wire goes out, so it never breaks. And the way you move the barrel, you move the system, the missile is going to follow it because it has the wire connected to it. It is very weird. They do have like 2 kilometers of that wire behind that missile. Strange, but it works. If you need wireless guided missiles, you need to be able to build all those chips, all that info-technological advances that Soviets and Iraq definitely doesn't have. Even nowadays the Russians are not able to build these things because they don't have the brain power as the US does, and it takes a lot of research to build these chips, to build these systems, algorithms. You can't just steal them, you have to reinvent them basically. Takes a lot. And if your country relies on heavy industry like oil producing or selling AK-47s, building these high-end technologies is kind of impossible. So yeah, wire guided is the best they can do.
Its 33mm thick armor plating provided protection from 7.62 armor-piercing rounds, and in a limited degree of fire, even 50 caliber machine gun fire. Like the T-72, however, Iraq's BMPs lacked thermal imaging capabilities or capable night vision sight factors, which would be decisive throughout the Gulf War. Facing off against Iraq's fearsome Republican Guard were elements of the U.S. Army's 7 Corps, to include the 1st through 3rd Armored Divisions and the 1st Infantry Division. Having seen no major action since the end of the Vietnam War, America's newly reminted all-volunteer army had some serious proving to do. Yet the U.S. Army had spent the last 2 decades drilling out its conscript force and restoring the capabilities and expertise of its leadership at the non-commissioned and commissioned levels, as well as engaging in routine exercises with NATO partners to stop a Soviet incursion through the Fulda Gap. The 7 Corps brought to bear the now legendary but as of then untested M1A2 Abrams, designed in response to Soviet deployments of
This military machine brings you freedom. There's not exhaust coming out of its bagpipes, it is the smell of good old American freedom and barbecue.
new main battle tanks. The M1A2 hosted a slew of revolutionary features, most notable of all being its Chobham armor, of which it was the first tank deployed which incorporated it. Still a classified secret, Jabam armor is a composite armor made up of steel plates layered with ceramic inserts and empty spaces meant to defeat anti-tank missiles and rounds by deflecting or redirecting explosive blasts and kinetic penetrators. It also featured layers of depleted uranium armor, making it one of the toughest fighting vehicles ever created. Its 120mm cannon is paired with a fire control computer which aids a gunner by calculating lead angle, ammunition type, and range to a target.
Depleted uranium armor compared to the Soviets' regular armor, it's the next level. You can't compare them. No. And also, you already see those aided systems that do so much work for the aimer, the guy who aims, how do you call them? They make their job so much easier, they're so much more accurate. They're different classes. For me, they're totally different classes.
Feature missing from Iraq's T-72s. The M1A2 also featured thermal and night vision imaging, as well as laser rangefinders, all features that would prove decisive in the deserts.
Laser rangefinders, I mean, this technology, Russians now have this technology, but it took them 20 more years to produce it after the US. It all goes to Russia and all goes to those countries, but it takes about 20 years time or one generation later that they get this technology. You truly need a lot of research, a lot of very strong science and money and time to be able to produce those things.
Iraq. The 7 Corps infantry were supported by M2 Bradley fighting vehicles, armed with a 25mm automatic cannon with a firing rate of up to 300 rounds a minute, and a tow missile launcher. M2s were heads and shoulders above Iraq's BMPs in capabilities. Its aluminum armor is reinforced with laminate belts and steel skirts capable of stopping up to 50 caliber rounds, and even offering some protection from long-range tank fire. M2s are equipped with both thermal and night vision imaging, once more granting.
Thermal and night vision might be standard for you US Army people, but it is very expensive and most of the countries cannot allow it to themselves. Estonians also only get it from the US, actually. Thank you for that. We have US night vision, but if your country truly relies on heavy industry, you're not able to produce those things. It's just not possible. So the thing maybe you take for granted, thermal and night vision, gives you so much of an advantage in the battlefield. And countries who don't have it, don't have the money for it, because it's so damn expensive. They can't fight in the dark. That's as easy as it is.
Them a major advantage over Iraq's BMPs. In total, American forces numbered at around 4,000 versus the Republican Guard's 2,500 to 3,000 personnel. Yet with well-prepared defenses and boasting the 4th most powerful military in the world at the time, the advantage was with Iraqi forces, and American military planners expected heavy casualties in the ensuing action. The battle. On the 23rd of February, American forces swept into southern Iraq. A frontal push by armor was coordinated with a sweeping hook meant to encircle Iraqi forces from behind and attack from their flanks. The initial action saw stunning American victories, with 55 Iraqi tanks and 45 armored vehicles destroyed, along with hundreds of enemy KIA, and the surrender of 865 prisoners. The next day, elements of the 7th Corps swept into northern Kuwait to sever Iraqi lines of communication and block the retreat of Iraqi forces. Another 50 enemy vehicles were destroyed, along with 1,700 prisoners captured. Moving to block further American...
This is going to be a pattern, of course. Old technology against new, old strategies against new. I guess Iraq was so confident because it hasn't had a battle with a very evolved nation. It forgot that it was a third world country actually fighting against the first world country, and it just, you know, if you're not reminded of it, you'll go cocky. But then the US comes and knocks on your door and lets you know that, yeah, we are here, we bring freedom. I mean, if Iraq would thoroughly analyze the situation and know the weapon systems that they lack to win this war, they cannot win it because they don't have the technology or manpower. They just have Allah, that's what they think, that's all. Please don't get offended by me being very passionate about this. I don't support war, I don't support violence, but if it happens, we talk about history here. This is my view of things. Don't take it personally. If you're Arab or if you're Iraqi, please don't. I'm nothing against anybody.
American advances and to secure their supply routes, Republican Guard forces took up positions along roadways, expecting an American attack to come along major roads, as they did not think anyone would be able to navigate the featureless desert. Unfortunately for Iraq, American forces were equipped with GPS, at the time a relatively new feature on armored vehicles.
GPS, another thing we all take for granted, but in war, if you don't have it, imagine how hard it will make things for you. You're in foreign territory, you don't know the roads, the signs are in Arab, you don't understand anything, but you have satellites up on the space that tell you exactly where you need to go, and you can surprise the enemy. This small thing, surprise attack, might win the entire war if necessary. Again, it comes down to these small technologies that the enemies cannot allow themselves, and the same situation applies now. Russia, China, those countries are not first world countries, I wouldn't say. They don't have the ability to produce those things en masse. Of course, they can produce them a few at a time, but not en masse. It's very important to have it en masse. Night vision is standard for a lot of US troops, thousands, but it is very rare in Russia.
Which allowed them to surprise Iraqi forces from unexpected avenues of attack, originating deep in the desert. On the 26th of February, 7 Corps' 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment was ordered to advance up to 70 Easting, an eastward measured distance designated by GPS, and engage the Republican Guard without becoming decisively engaged, so they could retain their maneuverability. At 16:07 p.m., E Troop of the 2 ACR, equipped with 9 Abrams, 12 Bradley fighting vehicles, and 220mm mortars, made first contact with the enemy. The main Republican Guard force had been entrenched near a village on the other side of a small rise in the terrain, in a reverse slope defense. Unaware of American GPS and expecting an attack to come along the main road, the Iraqi commander had dug in his 40 T-72s and 16 BMPs 1,000 yards from the ridge and created 2 engagement areas on the east side of the ridge and north and south of the village. He had also deployed several minefields which included both anti-personnel and anti-tank mines, and supported his armor with hundreds of infantry in hardened bunkers and trenches.
Imagine you do all of this work, but you face it the wrong direction because you don't know that the enemy has GPS. They're coming from the other way. Imagine how much this little GPS technology can cost you. 40 tanks, hundreds of lives, so much. These small things in war matter so much.
A reserve force of 18 T-72s and more BMPs was held near his command post about 3,000 yards east. American forces arrived from out of the desert, not along the road as expected, catching the Iraqis completely by surprise, destroying a bunker serving as an observation post by running over it. E Troop's lead Bradley took 2 surrendering enemy soldiers prisoner. A second Bradley came under fire from Iraqi forces trying to reposition inside the village, and 9 Abrams returned fire with high explosive rounds. Given the clear to advance, E Troop reoriented so that its Abrams would lead the charge, with its Bradleys falling back to provide support. Cresting the rise north of the village, the Abrams made immediate contact with the T-72s entrenched there. Weather had been poor all day and visibility was very low, yet the Abrams were able to clearly see and target their T-72 opponents via their thermal sights.
Oh, again, thermal vision. I'm getting very riled up, sorry. Just thermal vision, so important in battles. It will save your life or take it if the enemy has it. You have fog, you have night, you have rain, doesn't really matter. You have thermal vision, you still see the enemy, you can kill it up to 3-4 clicks. I don't know if it was that good back then, but nowadays 3 to 4 clicks. I think the Abrams can use the thermal vision that far. So if you're an infantryman trying to take out a tank nowadays, you don't have a chance. You really don't.
Superior fire control and precision eliminated all 8 T-72s they encountered in under a minute. Advancing past the wrecked tanks, E Troop immediately came under fire from more tanks, BMPs, and hundreds of infantry, all trying to reposition to meet the American attack. It was at this point that the E Troop had reached their limit of advance, 70 Easting, which they had been ordered not to exceed, with further orders to not become decisively engaged. This point in the battle, perhaps more so than the superior performance of American vehicles, proved to be decisive, as the commander of the E Troop, then Captain, today National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, disobeyed orders and commanded his troops to press the attack. This may seem like a court-martial offense, and certainly in many of the world's militaries it would be.
If this battle would have been lost, the guy would be probably in jail already. but the battle was won, so he's a hero. He took a risk.
Except the US military has for a long time embraced a doctrine of flexibility, which not only allows but encourages its junior officers to execute orders as they see fit.
Improvise, adapt, overcome, simplify.
High-speed pace of modern war and acknowledging the often superior situational awareness of junior commanders who are often on the front lines. The US military encourages...
I wish the Estonian military would use this more often. I have to say something negative about the Estonians now. As a conscript system, we were taken as stupid conscripts. We were not encouraged. On paper we were encouraged to think with our own heads, but every time anyone did, they got yelled at, they got said, wow, you have to follow orders. What do you think for yourself? I said do it like that, don't improvise here. And the next time they say, why don't you improvise? So it's very schizophrenic in Estonian army. The command doesn't really even know what they want from us, the conscripts. They tell us one, then they tell us the other thing. It's strange. I wish they would try to bring on the American way of being more flexible, encouraging the soldiers. But I know there's so many downsides to it, so I don't want to even get into that.
Its junior officers to take the initiative. This makes US forces extremely flexible and is often a deciding factor in modern combat. Iraqi forces, on the other hand, operated by a heavy-handed top-down command structure that severely limited individual officers' abilities to react to quickly changing situations. This Soviet-style command structure was most notably evident during the coalition's air war, during which US-led airstrikes severed communication links in Iraq's extremely robust air defense forces and rendered them extremely ineffective. At 70 Easting that day, this difference between command styles and military doctrines would prove to be as decisive a force as the mighty Abrams. E Troop continued its advance toward the next ridgeline at the 73 Easting, on which were positioned the reserve force of 18...
Okay, think about this. Right now, they are disobeying the orders. Everything they do from this point on will get them court-martialed or written in history, depending on how this battle turns out, and they didn't know it back then. So for them, it's a battle that truly will decide the rest of their lives.
72 tanks. Still waiting for orders from their commander, the T-72s were caught completely unprepared, and the first of their numbers were destroyed from a range of about 1,000 yards. The rest of the vehicles attempted to mobilize and exit the staging area, but American Abrams quickly crested the ridge and destroyed all of them at close range, now occupying the high ground that the Iraqi forces had planned on using to dominate the Americans. E Troop consolidated its position, but came under attack by a company-sized force of T-72s and BMPs. The Abrams, backed up by Bradley's firing TOW missiles, made quick work of the enemy force before they could close, eliminating the entire counterattack from long range. Meanwhile, E Troop's mortars suppressed enemy infantry, trying to mass further east, while artillery fire support rained down on other enemy positions. The Battle of 73 Easting lasted just over 23 minutes.
23 minutes to destroy over a company of tanks, T-72s. Crazy numbers. This shows it wasn't even a battle, it was, I don't want to say a massacre, because both sides really knew exactly what they were doing. Going to war could be a massacre then if they were shooting back, but it kind of was. The Iraqis didn't know it, but they couldn't win.
It resulted in an absolutely lopsided victory for American forces. Americans suffered 6 KIA and 19 wounded in bunker clearing operations by their infantry, and 1 Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. Iraqi forces suffered between 600 to 1,000 KIA and WIA, 1,300 prisoners taken, lost 160 tanks, 180 personnel carriers, 12 heavy artillery pieces, and several anti-aircraft artillery repositioned to serve as ground fire support. The battle proved the superiority of the Abrams tank design and the effectiveness of its classified Shabam armor, which had not seen combat yet. Despite taking numerous direct hits from T-72s, not a single American Abrams was rendered inoperable or required major repairs. In fact, the only Abrams to be lost during the entire Gulf War would be to friendly fire. The battle also proved the effectiveness of other as-of-yet unbattle-tested systems, such as military GPS and new generation thermal and night vision equipment. It proved the technological edge of American forces and ensured that all tanks built worldwide would include thermal and night vision equipment as a mandatory feature. The Battle of 73 Easting also proved the superiority of American military doctrine over Soviet doctrine.
Very true. Strategies were different, the command system was different, technologies were different, and all of those areas America was leading by a decade at least. And this is even going on nowadays with Russia. Russia plays a poker game. They don't have things they say they have. They are like Iraq back then. They are two decades behind in America, and they're trying to play the enemy, although they don't have the potential to even be a contester in the US dominating the world game. It's not gonna happen. But still, yeah, they are able to do very much harm but not win. My friends, I love these history videos. I haven't done them in a long time. I do like it. I do enjoy them. Become a patron. Legend and God tier patron will get one of those signed cups. If you want to be one of this 15 elite special people to get it, Legend and God tier patron will get it straight to your address. Go and do it. Also, you can send me a video link in a Patreon and I will react to it. I enjoy the history of these battles. I will do them more. Be back. And as always, my friends, until my next video, stay cool and bye bye.